Did you guys know that more and more the F1 student visa interviews are being rejected? I know before the pandemic, it was about 25%. Currently now in the last year, it's been about, one third, about 33%. Now it's getting even more and more, closer to maybe 40% of denials for F1 student visas. So in this webinar, we're going to be doing a deep dive on F1 student visa interviews. We've got an awesome expert, Ben. And then at the very end, we're going to have live Q&A to answer your questions with a former ex-visa officer who served abroad in consulates and embassies. So welcome, my friends, to this webinar. We're going to be talking about, this is not visa struggles. This is F1 student visa interview. Sorry for the title there. But we're going to be talking about how to prepare for your F1 student visa interview. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rob with Chine Coaching. And at Chine Coaching, we're all about helping you succeed and thrive in your abroad journeys. One of those biggest things is getting your visa interviews. I know it's a lot of pressure, a lot of worry. And our awesome guest today is Ben. Ben, welcome back. We've done some great video collabs together. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Rob. It's good to be back here talking to your audience. Yeah, my name is Ben. I used to be a visa officer. I did that for many years with the U.S. government. I worked in Latin America. I worked in Asia, did over 60,000 visa interviews in total, and that includes everything. I would say probably 15 to 20,000 of those were student visas, but also tourist visas, immigration visas, everything that you can imagine. During the course of that, I saw that a lot of my colleagues, and probably me too, when I was still learning my job, refuse applicants unnecessarily because we just don't know enough, right? And so then when I left the government, what I wanted to do was start sharing that inside knowledge about what's going on to make sure that everybody can get their visa issued. I hate to see somebody who's well qualified, who's got a good plan, who's got a good university that they've been admitted to, not pass their visa interview just because they're not prepared.
Yeah. We love seeing the success. I love all the messages that we get of people getting their visa years, but it also breaks my heart. We have so many people that get rejections. Our goal of this session is to help you not get rejected, to get that approval and start your dream abroad, especially for study abroad. A lot of you guys are going to be preparing and doing those F1 visa interviews this summer. So I want to know, where are you guys watching from? I'm here in the Dallas, Texas area. Love getting to help out the students at UT Dallas, UT Arlington here in North Texas. I know Ben lives in Texas, but he's at the HQ of Argo there on the East Coast. But let us know in the comments, where are you guys tuning in from? Would love to see which city, which country, where our awesome audience is. So we've got Nepal, Pakistan, Nigeria. Welcome, friends, Nepal. I'm drinking some tasty tea here. Let me know if you guys are drinking some tea or coffee. I feel like the best learning happens over a cup of something tasty like some chai. All right, we've got India, Pakistan, Cyprus, Delhi, Uzbekistan. This is incredible. Nigeria, India, you guys, this is so fun. Iran, welcome, friends. Welcome. We're going to have a great crowd. Get ready for your Q&A as well. But let's jump in. We got a lot of great content to cover. Ben, why are F1 visa interviews unique? I know there's so many visa types, but what makes this one unique? What do people need to know that's special about this?
Yeah. Well, the F1 visa, it's unique because it's got a very specific purpose, right? Which is to go to a university in the US or a high school or a postgrad or a language training school, to go to school in the US. A B1, B2 visa, it's really open-ended. You come in, you say you're going to go to Disney, you're going to go to business meetings, you're going to go to a trade show, you're going to go visit family. It's really open-ended. But the F1 visa interview is very targeted because you've got a specific purpose. That helps us, but it also kind of puts some boundaries on what we're going to be able to do in the interview. It helps us because we know this is exactly what the visa officer is interested in, right? You walk in, you've got your I-20 form, says the name of a university, a program, a duration, right? You're really clear about what you're going to be telling them. And they're not going to be surprised about what you're telling them, because it's, yes, I'm going to school. I'm going to study this for this long. This is how I'm going to pay for it, right? So they're expecting you to give them that information. So you've kind of got these guardrails on that kind of really do let you target in on what's important. And for an F1 visa interview, the two things that are the most important are your academics and your finances. For 90% of people out there, those are going to be the two important things. If you've had a visa interaction in the past and maybe you've gotten refused, or you have a family member that's immigrated, that might be that 10% that's got a different thing that might be the important part of the interview. But for most
Okay.
people, it's going to be your academics and finances. And the academics and finances could be, one could be strong, both could be strong, the other could be strong, and one's weak. You need to identify, okay, where's your strong point there? Is it your academics? Have you been admitted to a school with a great reputation, with strict entrance standards? Is it a higher level degree, a master's or PhD, where you can really highlight your academics? Or if you're going to a school that might not be so well known, do you have great financials to be able to support yourself? Is that what you want to focus on? Your personal financials, your families? You've kind of got those two things that you can balance out and decide how you're going to present your best self in front of the visa officer.
Awesome. And with academics, does that mean like just the admit and the quality of the university that they're going to? Is that what you mean by academics?
Yeah, it can be. So let's say, I'll give some examples. Some great academics would be if you've been admitted to Harvard, right? If you're going to Harvard for undergrad, you've been admitted to, the most famous, most prestigious university in the US. That's the thing that you want to say at the very beginning of the interview. When they say, okay, hi, what's your purpose of travel to the US? You say, Harvard. I am going to Harvard, right? You want that to be the first thing that they hear. But it could be, okay, you're going to go to University of Indiana for a PhD in linguistics. Okay, University of Indiana, it's a well-known state school. It's not Harvard, but it's a well-known state school. But you want them to know you've reached that level of a PhD. You've reached that high level. You're a very qualified student. If you've got a fully funded program, right, that shows that the school has recognized your academic excellence to the degree that they're going to fund your entire studies, right? So it could be a number of things, right? It could be that if you're going for undergrad at a university that's, we'll say mid-tier, you want to highlight that, how hard did you work to do that? Did you excel in your studies up until then? Did you get any awards? Were you honored in any way, right? Anything that you can do to show your bona fides as a student is going to help you.
Yeah, all those credentials. I love it. And friends, if you're going to be watching this replay later on after this live, let us know also in the comments where you guys are tuning in from. Love to see where the Chine coaching community is from, where you guys are going to. So super exciting. Another important thing to consider with F1 student visas is the busy time and the busy seasons. When do the majority of these visa interview happen? And when can people plan ahead so they don't get last minute or don't get a slot, and miss their, admit date?
The busy time, it's begun. We're in the busy season now. From now until mid-September, it's going to be really busy because most people go to school in the US on that fall semester start date schedule. So most people are going for their visa interviews sometime before that. Now, I don't know if your audience knows this yet. Previously, there was a 120-day limit on applying for your student visa. So if your student visa program started in September, you could only apply for that visa up to 120 days beforehand. If you came into the embassy 140 days before your program start date, they're not going to be able to give you a visa, right? Best case scenario, they put you in 221G until it hits 120 days and they issue. But worst case scenario, the officer just says, no, you're too early, and they refuse you. That's what you want to see. Nowadays, thankfully, State Department making improvements. They removed that restriction, and now it's 365 days. So you can apply for your program in advance. So if you're going to a program that starts in January of next year, get your I-20 as soon as you can and schedule that interview early. It doesn't help you to wait until the last minute. It helps you to be early. So from now until September, it's not going to get less busy. So you want to get your application in as soon as possible.
Plan ahead, but now you can do it even earlier. So take advantage of that. As soon as you get your admit and your I-20 and you commit, go get that visa interview done. That way you're not stuck fighting for the slots when it's peak prime time later this summer. So I love it. That's a great new tip. Now, another big piece of advice I want to share with our audience is how to prepare well. We think through the documents. I know we get a lot of document questions, just arriving the day of, what can people do to be in a good, just mindset, how to dress, and even just how do they function in an embassy, in a consulate before even stepping up to the counter. So what are those preparation tips for first-time visa interviews?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I like to tell everybody is that you're going to be nervous. Everyone's nervous. There's no way to not be nervous, right? You're going to go in there. There might be thousands of people in line with you. Rest assured, every single one of them is also nervous. That's the normal state of mind to be in when you go to a visa interview. So don't beat yourself up about it. Don't feel mad at yourself for feeling nervous. Expect that you're going to be nervous, and expect, okay, how should I prepare in order to do well, even though I'm nervous, right? That's the way to think about it. And when you go in, it's also good to know what to expect, because if you know what's going to happen, when those things happen, you think, yep, this is exactly what I expected. This is how the process is going to be. If you have the opportunity, walk by the embassy the day before and see, okay, well, I see where the line is and how the people are filing in. So you feel a little bit more familiar with the process. You're going to go in. There's going to be local staff from your country that are outside routing people into different lines, sorting you into different time slots. Then you enter depending on your embassy, the format's different, but you're going to enter the interior space. You're going to go to an intake window where they're going to take your passport and your documents. They're going to make sure that all the data is correct. This is not your visa interview. This is just where they're checking to make sure that your name in your passport matches the name in the system, that the passport number matches, the date of birth is correct, that you've got the I-20 form, that you've got everything, you've got your DS-160 confirmation page. They're making sure that you've got all the documents correct and everything's spelled right? Next, you might be going to a window where they're just going to take your fingerprints to confirm your identity. They're going to make sure that you're the person who's standing there with that passport. Sometimes that's combined into a single step at some embassies. So what you want to know is, where's that final window? See where people are having that final interaction and then they're leaving. That's the area where the actual visa interview happens, right? Those first two steps are just administrative. It's that final window where you're talking to that American visa officer, and that's where you're going to have the interview. So knowing a little bit about the process, I think, helps people relax, because it's not just a complete black hole with no information. That's what it's going to be like, and that's when you get your chance, right? A lot of people, and this is a tip that I see that people need, people think that you arrive at that window and then there might be some interactions and then the interview starts. No, that's not the way to think about it. The interview starts before you even walk up to the window. When the person in front of you walks away and the visa officer looks up and looks at you, that's the beginning of your interview, right? They're going to say,
first impression.
You to come up, right? Yeah, the first thing that they say, what's your purpose of travel to the US, right? Maybe they say it in English, maybe they say it in your local language, whatever that is. That's not just some bureaucratic question to get it out of the way before the interview starts. That's the interview, right? So many people say, oh, I thought that, I was going to get more opportunity to present my credentials. The opportunity is when they ask you that first question. That's when the interview has begun.
Got it. Okay, friends, we have a chai question for our audience. I want to hear from you who are tuning in. Is what colleges did you get admits at? So let us know in the comments. I know you guys have applied to universities all across America, all across the world. Where did you get admits at? Let's see where people are going, considering, and tell us maybe which one you picked as well. Throw the degree program in there. But yeah, would love to see where you guys are headed on your journey. Maybe you guys will find some friends who are, going to be attending the same college, the same degree. So go ahead and start throwing in the comments here. All right, we got Auburn University, North Texas, University of Minnesota, Wichita State. Very cool. So all over the country, Pace University, Buffalo, Texas A&M, Western Illinois, Houston. Oh man, you guys, these are great. IT Chicago, Portland State, Western New England. Man, you guys have some great admits. This is super cool. Yeah, keep throwing those in the chat. Replay family, again, throw those in the comments. Want to see where everyone's getting those admits to for our chai question. Ooh, Florida, St. Louis, Regis University, Ohio State, North Texas, NC State, and GIT. Man, we've got some other great videos as well on a lot of these. So make sure you guys check those out on our channel, reviewing those. If you guys didn't know, myself and Argo, we're very active on social media as well. So you guys can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, to get more tips, more advice. I know Argo's got a YouTube channel as well. Ben's put some great videos there. So make sure you guys are subscribed and following outside of this video to get great content, more tips. A lot of your questions can be answered in those places. And again, for those of you who are tuning in later, this is a fun webinar, and Ben, a former visa officer, is talking about F1 visa interview strategies. We've talked about some great topics, how to prepare well, what to expect, but now we're going to get more tangible. We're going to be talking about the common questions, red flags. So we've got some more great content to cover about F1 visa interviews, along with doing your live Q&A at the end. So get ready. Make sure when you guys type your questions that they're really clear and understandable. And we're going to get to those in just a few minutes. Okay, here's the big one that a lot of people want to know, Ben, is what are the common F1 visa questions?
All right. Yeah. I know everybody wants to know what are the common F1 visa questions, and I'll tell you some of them that you definitely can expect. But also, I want you to think about this a little bit differently. I don't want you to think, okay, what are the questions I'm going to be asked, and then prepare answers to those specific questions. Because in most cases, they're going to ask you a question that you didn't prepare for. Or they're going to ask you one question and it leads to more questions about the same thing, right? So if you just prepare memorized answers never really establish rapport. If you memorize answers, you're going to come off as robotic. What you should do is you should know in general, okay, what's my story? What's my plan? How do I tell that story? And then make sure that when you're answering that visa officer's questions, you're telling him that story so that he or she feels like they know you, feels like they understand what your plan is. Now, what are the questions they're definitely going to ask you? Where are you studying? What are you going to study? Right? These are obviously questions that they can find the answer to just by looking at your I-20 form. They can look down and they can see, okay, let's see, who do we have? Arizona State. Okay, I see that you're studying at Arizona State, and I see that you're going to study a PhD in Earth and Environmental Science, right? But why do they ask you that question anyway? Well, they have to start somewhere, right? What they want through this interview is just to get you talking so that they can understand who you are, what you plan to do, and they can decide, do I trust that you actually intend to do what you say you're going to do? So they ask that question. What you can use that for, you can use that opportunity not to just say Tulane, environmental science. No, use that opportunity to tell your story, to introduce yourself, right? To give a brief summary of your resume. Well, I'm going to Tulane to study environmental science because I already got my bachelor's degree in environmental science here in my home country. And I've worked for a few years, but now I want to take it to the next level. So I've been accepted into Tulane. I got a partial scholarship. So that's going to pay for half of it. And then my parents, because they've been very successful, I'm very fortunate my parents can cover the rest of the expenses. All of a sudden, you've given them a whole vision of a legitimate student in response to their question, rather than just saying Tulane, environmental science, and confirming what they already know.
Definitely. And I love how you talked about, and interacting with you guys before with visa interviews. It's not a test, it's a conversation. It's not about spitting out the right fact or answer. It's about clear communication, and it's more about telling your story and telling a story that makes sense. And
Absolutely.
so obviously you can prepare for some of these common questions about funding, admit, future plans, things like that. But I think another tricky thing is, can you tell your story in a way that makes sense? The basic 3-part story is, where have you been? What are you doing now? And where are you going? And I think if you can, do that well, then the visa officer is going to, have a better understanding and feel good about your situation. So, Ben, one more thing before we get to the red flags I want to talk about is the home ties.
Yep.
Now, this is a tricky thing because F1 student visas are non-immigrant visas. You are not supposed to have the intent to immigrate to America. You have that visa and work period. So what do people need to know about the importance of home ties in the student visa interview?
So the home ties, that's something that the visa officers are very intent on. It's in their regulations, it's in their training, that the visa applicant has to show ties to their home country. These ties can be anything. There's no limits on what they could be. They could be family, professional, financial, academic. They could be anything that convinces the visa officer that you're going to return to your country after staying in the U.S. as a student, as a J1 trainee, as a tourist, as any type of worker, any type of student, any type of visitor to the U.S. They want to see those ties that are going to bring you back abroad. Now, if they're talking to you about the ties, it might be too late in the interview. If you hear them say, "Oh, you lack ties to the U.S.," that means that they've already told you you're refused, and they're just trying to get you to move on. They're not going to ask you at the beginning of the interview, "What are your ties to your home country?" Right? That's the implicit question underneath all of the other questions that they're asking. Right? So if they're going to ask you, what are your plans for the future, right? That's an opportunity to demonstrate those ties. I know that so many people have the goal of going to the U.S. and studying, doing OPT, getting the work experience and the income from that, and then getting an H-1B after that. Hopefully winning the lottery. That is a legitimate legal plan, but that's not really the best version of your plan to tell at your visa interview. A better version of the plan is talking about what you plan to do immediately on that F1 visa, right? As a student, you plan to study, okay, and then are you going to go to a PhD afterwards? If you're planning to do OPT, well, sure, it's a great opportunity, but I don't know, what companies I might be able to get an opportunity with. Focus on the opportunities that'll be back in your home country, because you're going to have a lot more of those opportunities too. Those are the ones to focus on, right? In the visa interview that might be 2-3 minutes long, you don't have the opportunity to tell the visa officer everything. So you have to choose what you want to tell them then. And that's the time when you have to condense it to talk about what are your opportunities back home. Getting this degree in electrical engineering is going to allow me to go back to India, and I'm going to be able to get a lot better jobs. There are multinational companies where the salaries are going to be 3-4 times higher if I have a degree from the US. These types of future plans that involve your home country are the best thing to focus on.
Mm-hmm. We had one interesting question just pop up here about the home ties for student F1 and F2 spouse visas. Is there any documents that would be helpful for them to show in regards to proof of home ties? Is that something that visa officers consider?
I'm glad that you brought up documents. Documents are always secondary, right? They're important to have. If you're going to say, I own this property, you need to have some documents that back that up. I have this much money in a bank account. You need the documents to back that up. But the visa officer is never just going to say, well, please hand me all your documents. I'll sit here and review them for 15 minutes and then make a decision. That's never going to happen. They're only going to review your documents if you've convinced them to be interested in them through what you tell them. You've got to tell the visa officer first the information that you've got in those documents. And then maybe the visa officer will want to review those documents and see, okay, I'm going to confirm if that's correct. Let me confirm that your parents actually own this business. Let me confirm that you did get this scholarship. Let me see that confirmation letter about that scholarship, right? But you're going to tell them first. So don't go into the visa interview thinking you can just come in, hand them the documents, and then they're going to come to the right conclusion flipping through all those documents. You've got to be ready to tell them. It's kind of like sales, right? If you walked into anywhere to buy something, let's say that you're going to go buy a new cell phone, and you walk into the shop and you say, oh, I'd like to buy a new cell phone, and the salesperson just says, here's some documents you can read about the cell phones. It's not a very good salesperson, right? Yeah. But if they say, here, let me show you this phone. Actually, this phone has this much memory and this type of camera and this ability, and it's got this controls, right? Then you might say, oh, well, let me see the specs on that. Let me see this. I'd like to see a little bit more. But first, that salesperson has to convince you with what they're telling you. In the same way, when you go into the visa interview, you're selling something, you're selling yourself, and you've got to do that in the same way.
Definitely. I know home ties is one of the big red flags that visa officers are looking for, but any other red flags that people need to know about for especially the F1 visa interview?
Yeah, these red flags. I like to call them hurdles too, because you've got highlights, which are the things that are helping you get your visa issued, your financials, your academics, whatever they may be, your professional background. But then there are these hurdles, these red flags, which are going to be things that at first glance are going to make the visa officer suspect that they shouldn't give you the visa. And what you need to do is know what these red flags are and know how to counter them when the visa officer brings them up, right? The most common red flag would be if you've been refused previously. If you've been refused before, that's the first piece of information that the visa officer will see, especially if you apply in the same location. So if you applied in Mumbai and you got refused, and then you apply in Mumbai again, when they scan your passport, the first thing that they see is you were refused before.
Gotcha.
If you apply in a different post, they won't see that immediately. They'll see it about 4 or 5 seconds later. It's still right at the very beginning of the interview. So they're going to see this and they're going to have a negative thought. You need to know, okay, they're going to think that I should get refused because their colleague already refused me, and you need to be ready to counter that. How do you counter that? Usually by bringing up whatever your most stellar point on your resume is, right? So if you got admitted and you had a partial scholarship, but you got refused before, you walk into that interview and they say, Okay, what's your purpose of travel to the US? You say, I'm going to Tulane to study environmental science. I applied before and I was refused. I'm not sure why, because I got a half scholarship to fund my studies. It's an academic scholarship because I've done so well in my undergrad. And my parents, I'm fortunate, they've been very successful and they can pay for the rest of it. Right? Putting it into that context, there are a lot of times they're going to ask that question, what's changed since your previous refusal? Answering that question directly is usually not the best tactic to overcome that prior refusal, because that question is a trap. That question is actually the visa officer trying to find the easiest way to end the interview, because they're told by their managers, if nothing's changed since a previous refusal, you should just refuse them again. That's a way to make their jobs easy, right?
Yeah.
So when they say this, they're trying to get applicants who are going to say, well, nothing's changed. Or they say something irrelevant, like, well, last time I said my father was my sponsor. This time I say my mother's my sponsor. That's not a real change, right?
Yeah.
And so then they think, okay, wait, they just gave me permission to refuse them again. But what they can't ignore is if you give them information that makes them think that you should get issued your visa. So if you've got something like a scholarship, right, or the university where you've been admitted, right, or a grant or a graduate assistantship, or if your family has funds and they're able to pay for your studies, whatever that stellar point on your resume is, bring that up at the beginning. Because if they get that thought in their head, they want to make the right decision. Visa officers want to make the right decision. In fact, they believe that they are making the right decision every single time. So if you tell them something that makes them think, oh, wait, why would this person be refused if that's true? They're going to investigate it to see if it's credible and if it changes their mind and if they're going to issue that visa. So first thing, very beginning, counter those red flags, bring up that information. Another red flag would be if you've got a family member who is in the US. Right? If you just say on your resume, there's part on your DS-160, there's a question that asks if you have any relatives in the US. You can put their names and their relation to you. So if you just say, yes, my brother's in the US, they ask you, oh, your brother's in the US? Yes. Know that the visa officer is always trying to think what's the most negative possible scenario here. So when you say that you've got a sibling in the US, the first thought that visa officer has is, oh, did they somehow stay in the US illegally? That's their first thought, right? They're thinking, ooh, if it's illegal, then I'm going to refuse them, right? Or if it's an overstay, or if it's a change of status, right? So if somebody goes on an F visa and then gets married and gets a green card, the visa officers, despite that being completely legal, might interpret that as negative. You've got to add context. You've got to add the story. If it's to an H-1B, definitely add more details to let them know, hey, this was a prestigious transfer. Oh yeah, my brother went to the US and he studied at University of Minnesota, and now he's working at Intel as an engineer. Okay, that's a whole different path than, oh, my brother went on a tourist visa and then applied for asylum and that was refused, and then he got temporary protected status, and then he went out of status, and then he got married to a US citizen, right? That's a completely different story. So if you get that good story, definitely highlight the good parts and show, yeah, I've got a family member that did things the right way. On the other hand, if you've got a family member that did things in a way that the visa officers are going to interpret negatively, you need to draw a differentiation. Yes, my sister did this, but I've got a different situation. I've got a different plan, right? You have to acknowledge those negatives and then give the information that counters it.
Yeah. Speaking of what you just mentioned, Shadi's asking, is winning a lottery before, I'm guessing a DV lottery, beforehand, would that be a red flag when applying for a different visa?
Well, if it's a H-1B lottery, then no. But if it's the DV lottery, it could be, yes. If you actually get selected in the DV lottery and put in an application for it, and especially if you've appeared for an interview for that DV visa, that's going to show up in their system. And applying for a DV visa shows immigrant intent, right? You showed up for an interview to get a green card visa to go to the US. So then if you go in the next year and say, no, I have no immigrant intent at all, it's going to be much harder for you to prove that to them, right? Because they're going to say, wait, well, I've got immigrant intent right here in my record, right? You submitted the documents.
Yeah.
Usually, though, if you just apply for the DV, that's not something that they're considering in the interview.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, and before we jump into the live Q&A, which I know we've got lots of awesome questions here in the chat, I want Ben just to tell us a little bit more about Argo Visa Coaching. The Argo is an approved China coaching partner. We love working together, seeing this incredible success. They have a really cool technology tool I'm going to show you in just a second after Ben tells you a little bit more about Argo, and then we'll jump into the live Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, Argo Visa is a network of over 25 former visa officers who worked in 35 countries, speak 14 different languages, and collectively we've done over 1 million visa interviews. We were all the officers sitting behind those windows, making those decisions, reviewing visa applications all over the world. We know through our experience all of the regulations related to any visa type that you can think of. And also, we know what's going on inside the minds of visa officers. We know collectively what the culture is, what influences their decision, what are their priorities, what are their values, what are their stressors, what are their incentives, so that you know how to go in a super short window of time, get them the information they need to make the right decision and issue you your visa. So you can go to our website, argovisa.com. That's where you can book a meeting with one of our team members of visa officers. We're going to pair you up with the visa officer that worked in your country that knows your type of visa situation. If you've got something that's really complicating, perhaps like an OPT problem with a different employer, we've got officers that are specialized in that. We're able to help a lot of our clients overcome super difficult situations, multiple prior refusals, and get back on their journey, get back into their studies in the US.
Awesome. So yeah, let me remove this. All right, going to do some fancy technology stuff here. Okay. Argo's just recently started an awesome new virtual visa interview checkup bot, and it's really cool. I want to give a quick demo and show you guys how it works. So what's your full name? Let's do Bob Adams here. Email address, we'll do coaching@gmail.com. And what's really cool about this is it's going to give you a score and a ranking. Ben, do you want to tell us how this was created and kind of the purpose for it while I'm filling this out and showing people?
Yep. So our team of former visa officers and I put this together using our knowledge of how we did visa interviews all over the world. So we've got all the different visa types in here, and then we added all the considerations, all the important factors that we take into account when we were making these decisions. We had to shorten it down because then it would have been a 30-minute quiz, right? So we shortened it down to the most important factors, which are going to be your nationality, where you're going to apply, if it's an F visa, the school you're applying to, your major, how you're going to pay for it. And then we weighted all of these, and we actually used some AI, and we've got some great engineers that helped us with this to fix a distribution for these results, where we're able to give our clients an idea of how well prepared they are to go into their visa interview, right? So hopefully with this, we're able to identify some things that maybe you're not too sure about, or maybe you don't know that it's going to affect your visa interview. And then when you go through our process, you're going to see, oh, actually, you know what? One of these answers that you gave us really, from our experience, we know that this causes a problem in a visa interview, and we'll highlight that.
Yeah. So we've just real quick, it kind of asks about previous travel history. If you've done visas before, yes or no, occupation. So I'm just doing kind of your typical Indian student, because I know a lot of our friends are watching from India. Software developer, bachelor's degree. Yes, getting nervous. Let's say, yeah, we've got a relative, I've got that uncle and aunt in Gujarat or in New Jersey, which a lot of Indian friends do. Has anyone filed an immigrant position for you? No.
Did you just call New Jersey New Gujarat?
Yeah, little Gujarat is New Jersey. So yeah, a lot of people have relatives in New Jersey, Bay Area. Those are some of the big hubs. But yeah, New Jersey is like Gujarat 2.0. Amazing food there if you go there, like Jersey City. So let's do a pretty common one. Let's say let's do University of Southern California, USC. That's a good one. Let's do master's degree. Let's do computer science. Did you receive scholarship? Yeah, let's do some scholarship. Good English. It's been less than 1 year since you know we've been working maybe 2-3 years, some work experience. Total cost of your program. Let's see. This would be $100,000 right here, Ben, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's see. What do you think is a good estimate? So that's about 20,
maybe for 2 years of a computer science master's, maybe 120.
120. Okay, let's put that there. All right, let's submit. And then what is the primary source of funding? Let's say loans. That's pretty common. And then how much funding? What is typical here for banks with students, do you think?
This is going to be, it's going to vary. You know, some people are going to have a whole lot of resources. Some people are going to have less.
So show in your bank account belonging to your parents. Oh man, that's tough.
Maybe 20,000.
Okay, let's do that. Okay.
So I'm getting a good idea of where we're going to come out here with our assessment.
Maybe, you know, your parent, let's say they don't own any real estate.
Yep, that's exactly where I would have put this. And so we're over 50% because
yeah, give us why this breaks down like this.
We're going to USC, right? We're going to a good university. We're going for a STEM major. So these are pluses, right? We've got some good academics, but we're going on a loan, right? A loan tells a visa officer, okay, your family might not have the resources to pay for it on your own, so you had to go to a loan, which isn't as good as getting a scholarship or your family basically having, you know, an excess of funds and being able to pay for it. So it's going to be harder to explain the finances. I also noticed that we said that this person had never traveled outside of their home country before, right? And so no prior travel is also something that makes the visa officers a little bit hesitant, because what they're trying to guess is, if you travel abroad, will you come back? Right? And if you've never traveled abroad, they're just having to guess. So in this case, we're over 50%. You've got the good basis here for a good visa interview. You got those good academics, but we've also got some things that we know the visa officer is going to be concerned about. And if you don't prepare correctly for it at 60%, you know, you're almost rolling the dice and hoping that it's gonna come out right.
Okay.
This tool, you know, and I also want to add, Rob, that it's free. It's a free tool. You can go in there. And if anybody is wondering, you know, how this works on the back end, or if it's really doing something on the back end, if you did this, and we won't do this again right now because it takes a little bit of time, but if you do this again and you change those answers, you're going to get a different result.
Yeah, it is custom. It's not just preset. Yeah. So I'm putting the link here in the chat. The link is also in the video description. You guys can go to the Argo website, go to the top here where it says Visa Checkup, plug in your scenario and see what answer you get, you know, and see, are you looking good? Do you have those red flags? Yeah, so it's a great just self-evaluation free tool that Argo's created to help you guys out. So check that out. We're going to do some live Q&A now. I'm really excited. We've got some time. Couple things. One is, don't keep repeating your same question over and over and over again. If you keep asking the question 100 times in the comments, we're going to skip it because that's annoying. Also, super chats are going to be prioritized. So if you do a super chat question, we'll try and prioritize as well. And the more clear and concise, you know, just don't make a statement saying, hey, this happened to me. You know, ask a specific question. The better questions you ask, the more likely I'm going to pull them up and answer them. So, okay. Ben, you ready for our fun Q&A?
I love Q&A. This is
okay.
The most fun part.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back here and let's get some good ones. Usman, can I apply for a third country I'm studying after 2 rejections last year? So third country, you know, application after some rejections. They're from Gambia, studying in China on full scholarship masters there. And now they've got a scholarship to study at OU, I'm guessing Oklahoma. So yeah, very unique situation. What are your thoughts on this one?
Okay. So
it's Ohio University.
Yeah, there's a couple issues here. And I think the first one we want to deal with is the third country national. A third country national, that term in the visa world, it means that when you're applying for your visa outside of your home country. So as someone from the Gambia and you're applying in China, you're going to be considered a third country national. Usually the rule of thumb is that that's going to lower your chances to get your visa issued. It's because in China, they don't know anything about the Gambia. They don't know anything about where you might be in society, what situation you might have, what your prospects for work, or what your family's financial situation might be like in the Gambia. And so they're more likely to be not confident. And when they're not confident, their refusal rate goes up. So in
Mm-hmm.
general, in a situation like that, you do have less of a chance, and you're going to have a better chance in your home country. And in this case, I'm going to tell you why you're going to have a better chance in your home country. The officers in China, I'm going to say, because I also worked in China, the officers there usually, have some background in East Asia and China. They speak Chinese. Maybe they have some familiarity with West Africa, but most likely not. And so they're going to think, okay, well, I don't know anything about this country. Their confidence is going to be lowered. Even though you're in China and you're studying on a full scholarship, their confidence is going to be lowered. But let's think about this if you go to the Gambia. In the Gambia, you go there, and who are you compared to the other visa applicants there? Well, you're from the Gambia. You've been in China abroad. Number one, you see, oh, well, this is someone that's been studying abroad on a full master's. You look way more impressive compared to the other visa applicants in the Gambia than you do in China. A lot of students are in China studying, right? Except you're the student whose country they don't know. In the Gambia, they know you, right? You can tell them about your family, what your family does, what the financial situation is. They're going to understand that because it's in the right context. And they're going to think it's more impressive that you were studying abroad and had a full scholarship in China. So you're probably going to have a much better chance applying in the Gambia than you are applying in China.
That's great. Very practical question. Do they need to be clean shaven, or are beards allowed when coming for a visa interview?
Beards are allowed. Beards are allowed. I had a beard as a visa officer. I have a short beard now. Perfectly okay. You do need to be clean. What I would say, people want to know what you should wear to the visa interview. You should wear whatever you would normally wear when you're trying to present your best self. If you're a student, wear what a student would wear on a day when they're going to school and maybe they're going to give a presentation, right? If you've never worn a suit, a three-piece suit with a tie in your life, don't go out and buy a new one. Don't borrow one. You're not going to feel comfortable. You should wear what you feel comfortable in, right? You shouldn't wear a tuxedo. You're not going to your marriage. You just need to look smart, clean, and representative of who you are, which is, if it's a student, you can look like a student.
I like it. All right. Bob the Builder's asking, is it considered bad to take a gap year? So, they finished their bachelor's undergrad. They want a year to prepare to do all these exams and tests and stuff before going to master's.
Yeah.
Just from an academic standpoint, I don't think it's a bad thing. If you can do some work experience or internships in there, that definitely helps. But I think more importantly is just communicating your situation on what you did during that gap year, so it makes sense to the visa officer. Anything to add to that?
That you're exactly right, Rob. The thing to not do is just say, I was unemployed. Okay, then you've given them no information. They need a story, right? They need a story. They need a narrative. They need to know who you are. That's the only way that they're going to feel confident, especially if you've got a gap. Those are those potential red flags. A gap in your studies makes you a non-traditional student. They need to know, okay, what's this gap all about? Gap year, that term, if it's a gap year that you can talk about in the sense of, taking time off, experiencing some things, trying some different things, saying gap year, that's something that kind of relates to a concept they have in their mind of, oh, a gap year, right? I know about that. That's different from there's a gap on the resume and someone was unemployed. Completely different images that they're getting in their mind. So yeah, you can do that, but don't assume the visa officer knows that you are preparing for your GRE and TOEFL. Let them know, I was doing this. I was full-time preparing to take my test to get the best admit that I could.
Awesome. All right. Ansar, thanks for the super chat. He's asking, I was deported from Saudi Arabia to India on an emergency certificate. My passport was confiscated by my sponsor. Can I get the F1 visa approval to study in the US, or what kind of impacts will that have from their kind of immigration and travel history?
Well, countries, most countries in the world are not sharing information about immigration issues. So in this case, I can't say with certainty, but I'm going to guess that Saudi Arabia's immigration information is not being shared with the U.S. or with any other countries. They're not They're not sending that information out. So if it's just a purely an immigration matter, I don't think that's going to be information that they're going to consider in your US visa interview. If there was something criminal associated with it and it's put into a criminal database, then there is the possibility that they're going to know about it. Anything that goes into, an Interpol database, that information does get shared between countries way more often for law enforcement. And so that stuff might pop up and they'll be able to look into that. But with something like this, without more information, I wouldn't be able to say.
Gotcha. All right. Okay, so this one I think relates to a lot of people. People having multiple rejections. So this person was refused 2 times. Next is their 3rd attempt. Going to University of North Texas. For people who have 2, 3 rejections, what would you suggest?
All right. Well, the number one thing I can tell you is don't do the same thing you did the last time.
Yes,
that's the first thing.
And expect something different to happen.
Yeah, if you do the same thing, you should expect the same result, right? Same inputs, same outputs. It's possible. Some people have gone in for an interview, gotten refused, come in again with the exact same plan, given the exact same answers, and then they've been issued. The reason is because we all knew when we were visa officers, there's always somebody, let's say, the rare 1% of our colleagues who's making really bad decisions. And when we would see that, okay, well, Joe Schmo over here refused someone last week, I'm not considering that a negative against them. They're going to get a fair hearing again, right? So that can happen, but don't roll the dice. Don't think, oh, maybe that will be me, right? Take control of the situation. Know that you can be an active participant in your interview and you can change the way they're going to think about it. In your case, what I would do working with you is I would want to know everything that happened in those first 2 interviews. The first interview especially, because that's when the tone was set. That's when that initial decision was made. I would want to know everything that was on your DS-160 and every question that they asked you and what your answers were. Not just the questions, but what your answers were, right? Then we have all the inputs that went into that visa officer's decision, right? All your DS-160 and all of your answers to their questions. From that, I can know from my experience what was going on in their mind, right? Why did they refuse? What information would they have recorded to tell future officers, this is why I've made this decision and why this might happen again? Then we can start to strategize, why did they refuse? And now how can we change their mind for the next time? What you need to do if you're going to do this, in the next few hours and you don't have time to get help, you need to think, okay, what is the reason that I got refused? And it's not the reason that they that they gave you on that piece of paper, lack of ties. You're going to have to intuit it by thinking about what were they asking about? What were they concerned about? What was their major doubt about my application? When you go in for the next interview, that's the first thing you need to address and talk about when they ask that first question.
Yeah. And
new strategy.
Depending on the time, if you've been refused once, twice, 3 times, getting on a coaching call with Argo Visa, they're going to help you break down, decipher, and see really, with a good idea of where those refusals are coming from and how to pivot and have a better strategy. Frank, this is a good one. They want to learn how to kind of restructure or communicate that their uncle is sponsoring. A lot of people might have an uncle in country, out of country, so how can you communicate to a visa officer that their uncle, not their parents, but another relative is sponsoring their education? What's a good way to talk about that?
In a lot of countries, having somebody like an uncle sponsor education is really common, right? In the US, it's not so common. I think that most of the officers in countries where this might be more common probably know that it's more common, but still, intuitively, it doesn't feel so natural as parents sponsoring, right? So don't just say, my uncle is sponsoring me and leave it at that, right? Because the first question is going to be, well, is it your real uncle or is it just some person that you call uncle, right? That's going to be the first thought, right? Is this just some non-relative benefactor who's going to pay? But then you also want to give the context of how this uncle is able to sponsor you, right? Where does their funding come from and why they would be willing to sponsor you, right? So if it's, okay, well, my uncle is going to sponsor me because, it's my mother's brother. There you're saying, okay, it's my actual blood relative. It's my mother's brother, and he's been really successful in real estate. So he's actually helped a couple of my cousins go to college as well, and he wants to help me too because he's kind of the the person in the family who's been the most successful. And I have always been a good student, and so he wants to sponsor my education. A simple explanation like that is going to do way more for you than just saying, "Oh, my uncle," right?
That's great. All right. Ajarwal, thanks for the super chat. His brother is in the U.S. on H-1B now and applying to the same university where his older brother passed out from, graduated from. What impact? I know can be common where siblings go to the same university as before, with that familiarity. Especially, one like Texas, UT Arlington, very common with international students from India. So yeah, how can people talk about that with family there, already graduated, working now, and same university?
Yeah. Well, this is one where you do have family in the U.S., right? So just saying I have family in the U.S. is gonna lead to a negative thought. You need to make sure the visa officer knows that your brother's on an H-1B, right?
Which is a good thing.
That's a good thing because it shows, oh, this family is doing things right. They're applying for the change of status. They're doing something that it takes a high level of qualifications to get into. Also graduated from the university in the U.S. So when I go to this interview and I'm going to say I'm going to go to this university, I would actually say this is one of my highlights, right? Maybe you've also got financial highlights. Maybe you've also got some academic highlights. This is another highlight that I would want to bring to the forefront. And I would do it at the very beginning when they say, what's your purpose of travel to the U.S.? I would say, well, I'm going to go to the University of Texas at Arlington. It's actually the same university that my brother graduated from, and he's in the U.S. now on an H-1B visa as a software engineer working for company X, right? Letting them know that entire story. So one, they don't ever start thinking negative things when they see that you got a family member in the U.S. They already know the story. And two, they already see, oh, this family does things the right way.
That's great. Here's an interesting one. Someone's got their interview coming up, but because of a non-disclosure agreement, they can't talk about their specific work with a kind of a tech ed company working for 5 years. So how can they talk about this in a way that is helpful for a visa officer? Have you faced this before doing visa interviews?
The visa officer, I can tell you this right now, will 100% not accept if you tell them that you can't talk about your work because of a non-disclosure agreement. It's kind of like, I don't know, talking to your attorney, right? Your attorney's not really able to help you if you don't tell them what's up, or if you're in court, right? I don't know what would happen in court if you said that. But yeah, we'll stick to the visa interview example. They're not going to accept if you say this. You'll have to make the decision about whether you're going to talk about your work or not. If you can talk about your work in a way that doesn't violate that agreement, then you should do that. But if this agreement says you can't talk about it at all, that's really going to hurt you. I'm not going to tell you to break this agreement, but you need to be able to talk about your work in the visa interview.
Yeah, maybe talk to your company, the leadership, the legal team there, and see what they can approve you to talk about that can help you in this visa interview.
I can 100% say if you go into the interview and say, I can't talk about my work because of a non-disclosure agreement, you're not going to get your visa issued.
Yeah. Communication is important.
There's some nefarious stuff going on, or at least maybe there's sensitive work going on.
Yeah. All right. From Rahul, they have their graduation in December. A huge issue, a lot of our student friends, is parents not being able to get those travel visas, the B1, B2, because of the backlogs. Even though trekking regularly, I know at one point it was like a year wait just to get a slot. So what are tips for people to get dates, even just trying to, several months in advance? What would you say to people who are trying to help their family with this?
All right. So the first step is you've got to get a visa interview scheduled, right? So if you look and you see that there's none scheduled during the time that you want it, you've still got to schedule the appointment because that's the only way to request an expedited appointment. So you've got to get that appointment scheduled and on the books.
That first one, whenever it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for your parents, if your parents have been world travelers, have been all around the world, then sure, let's say there's no appointments available in New Delhi. And so you're going to say, well, they can fly to Dubai and get an appointment. Okay, then that's going to work for them if they've already been all around the world traveling. if they've never traveled anywhere before, going as a third country national to another country where there are visa appointments available, it's not going to be the best idea, right? So you kind of have to, you're going to have to weigh those different situations. We can help you do that. You're going to have to find out, okay, is it a good idea to go to a third country, or do I need to try in my own country? Once you decide that, if that visa interview is too far in the future, you're going to have to request an expedite. The expedite is you submit it. There's a limited number of words. You can't attach documents. It's in the appointment system, and really all they're looking for is what's the date of the purpose of travel, and when's the date of your interview, to see if you can't arrive on time without the expedite. You can't write a lot. They're not really taking a lot of humanitarian concerns into account. If it's not, oh, there's a funeral that's happening, or there's this medical treatment that has to happen. Just, oh, I would really like to, oh, my parents would be so sad if they didn't get it. They're not taking that into account. It's just, I'm graduating from University of North Texas on May 5th. My parents don't have a visa interview until June 14th. Can you please give them an expedite so that they can attend my graduation? The shorter and sweeter, the more chances are of being approved. Because if it's too long and it's convoluted and you're not direct, they're just going to say, I don't know, refuse. Right?
Yeah.
Just be as
we have a
direct.
couple videos on the channel, on the YouTube channel as well, that talk about expedited or emergency visa slot booking. So check that out for more instructions and details. All right, from Arash. So going for PhD, had done bachelor's in polymer engineering and master's and a lot of research and papers. So, I mean, sounds like a really good situation, but how can they continue to convince the visa officer for now going to this PhD abroad in America?
Yeah. So if you got a PhD and you're going to be fully funded, most PhDs are fully funded. You got a good chance of getting your visa issued. What you need to make sure is that the visa officer knows that it's fully funded. Saying that always helps. Not just, I'm going for my PhD, but I'm going for my fully funded PhD, right? It's just another, you're just gilding the lily when you do that. So saying that is key. In this particular situation, being from Iran and having a high level degree in a STEM field, there are a lot of regulations that are related to that. And we won't get into all those specifics. You can look them up and you can see, these regulations are public, and you can see what the visa regulations related to Iranians are. One of the officers that works with Argo, he was the Iranian visa expert in Turkey. And so he interviewed every single Iranian that came in through Turkey. He speaks Persian. He's our expert in-house on those regulations. And we've helped a lot of Iranians be able to get through their interviews, get their visas issued, but even better, get them issued more smoothly than otherwise, because there are a lot of pitfalls that can cause an Iranian visa application to take 6 months.
Got it. Okay. Thanks again, Ansar. So another unique situation here. They were kind of maybe attacked and beaten up the other day and reported to local police. So maybe this would kind of put them in the category of, a police report, or, something in relationship with the police, and then surrendered themselves in the consulate general in India in Saudi Arabia. And this is what led to them getting deported. I think we had mentioned this before, but will this have an impact on their F1 visa interview?
So the details here are still a little bit unclear. Perhaps, being reported to the local police, but then, you were deported, you surrendered yourself. It seems like a really complex situation. If you were arrested, I think you should assume that there's a good chance that there's a criminal record. Even if charges are dropped later, that once that record starts, it stays there. So if you were arrested, if they took your fingerprints, then I think you should count on there being a criminal record in your background that could probably be seen by any immigration official for any country that's using computers for their immigration purposes. US, UK, Australia, anywhere. So in this case, these details, it sounds like there was an interaction with the police. Then there was a problem and you were deported. I'm gonna say that you should assume that this is going to be a negative at your interview. Be ready to talk about it when it's brought up, right? Don't just be like caught in the headlights with nothing to say when they bring it up. Expect they're going to bring it up and know how to talk about it in a concise way. Don't give them a long yarn that's going to take 10 minutes to tell. Tell them something in 20 seconds that sums up the entire story in a way that lets them feel confident they know everything. And 2, makes them feel assured that there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Rakshit's got a great question here. What documents will my brother need to provide me if I'm adding him as my sponsor? He's working or residing in Germany, so got a relative in Germany sponsoring. I'm guessing maybe someone coming to the U.S. How can they have good documents and communication for their visa interview and application there?
So choosing one person as a sponsor, you do have to choose one name in your DS-160. But in the visa interview, when you're asked about finances, don't limit yourself to just talking about one person. Talk about the entire scope of your financial funding. A brother paying for something, also in the American context, is less common, right? So you're going to have to explain this more if you're putting your brother as a sponsor, right? When they say, okay, wait, who's sponsoring you? I think a better answer here would be, well, it's going to be my family, my parents, and my brother are going to be sponsoring me. My parents do this, and my brother does this. He's working in Germany and does this, right? If you just say, my brother will pay, okay, you're leaving open a lot of questions. Why? How? How does your brother have the money to pay, right? He's in Germany. What's he doing in Germany? What status is he on in Germany, right? If your brother is in Germany on a status that would be a bad status for in the U.S., let's say, an asylee. Asylum, while it's fully necessary, the visa officers, unfortunately, interpret it as a negative. So if your brother's in Germany as an asylee, saying that he's going to sponsor you is actually going to be a negative because you're going to have to explain what he's doing in Germany. Why is he in Germany? And then it comes up that he's an asylee. They're going to think, well, this family claims asylum when they get to another country. So it's not going to go well. So in that case, you would want to change it and have your parents as your sponsor.
Yeah, that's good. Ben, we've crossed the hour. Do you have a few more minutes for some more questions? We've got
Let's
a lot of great ones.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Tusif, thanks for the super chat. They've got a 2-part question here. As my husband has a green card, I also applied for an I-130 last month. Would the I-130 affect my education visa, which I already have one? Is this a good approach to apply for a student visa and then continued, or should I not apply for one? What are the chances of getting a student visa in this case? How should I show my husband or father the sponsor?
Okay. Can we go back to the part 1 of that? So
yeah, I can go back and forth. Yeah, read that again real quick.
Okay. So this is somebody, and so everyone knows what the context is here on this. This is somebody who wants to apply for a student visa, but they've also got an immigrant petition in for a green card. So the conflict we have here is applying for a non-immigrant visa, but you've got immigrant intent because you're applying for that green card. In these cases, the visa officers technically are supposed to say, well, you have immigrant intent, and so you can't be eligible for an immigrant visa because I know you have immigrant intent. But in practice, they can think that you have dual intent, which is you intend to use that immigrant visa in the future when it becomes active and you're able to get it legally in due time. But they expect that you're going to use that non-immigrant visa, that student visa, in a legal, lawful way before that immigrant visa comes around. And so what you have to do is go in and know they're going to see that I-130 petition for an immigrant visa, and you're going to need to explain it. So I wouldn't even wait for them to find that and ask you about it. I would lead off with that and say, I'm applying for an F1 student visa, but I also want you to know I've got a green card petition because my husband is a citizen or an LPR in the US. I'm planning to use that when it becomes available. But until then, I'm going to abide by the regulations and just use my F visa as a non-immigrant visa. Okay. Right? There are going to be a lot more details in your case that are going to support this because we don't know what's the actual, the husband's status, but that's the general format that you're going to need to use.
Yeah. I want to address this one really quick too, just because this is one I've seen a lot.
Mhm.
I've gotten this question a lot recently on messaging and stuff. And so I think this is kind of common for international students. Shub says, I've been rejected before for a B2, so kind of tourist business travel visa. But now they're trying to go for their international F1 visa to Arizona State, good university. What kind of impact is a previous tourist visa denial going to have on now going for a student
Mhm.
visa interview?
All right, this is a good question. So what we have here is a prior refusal, but it was 4 years in the past. So that prior refusal is going to have an effect because when they open up your case, they're going to see, oh, you were refused twice. They're going to look and see what happened in that interview. What did that previous officer say about why he or she refused you? Now, though, we're 3 or 4 years in the future, so you've got the opportunity to present a different story, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the visa
A
officers
lot has
say,
happened
oh,
between now and then.
exactly. The visa officers will always say, "Oh, you need to wait longer." What they're meaning is maybe with time your situation will change and you'll have more credentials, right? More ties that will help me feel confident to issue you your visa. So you've got these refusals, but with this 4 year gap, you're going to get the opportunity to tell them some more information. So first of all, analyzing what happened in 2019, right? Figuring out what happened in those interviews and what might be the concern, because that happened 4 years ago for you. But for that new visa officer, they're going to open it up and read it today, and it's happening like it's today for them, right? So you're going to have to address whatever those previous concerns were. And then talking about what the plan is, right? Yeah, I
Mm.
applied for a B1, B2 in 2019 to go as a tourist. I don't know why I was refused. I had this job, I had these studies, I was doing this, and now my plan is to go and get an F1 at ASU. I'm going to be studying whatever it may be for a master's, right? Explaining that situation, showing the change, right? Addressing what happened in 2019 and then showing that change.
That's great. Everyone, this has been awesome. Again, I highly recommend you guys go check out that Visa Checkup bot where you can put your situation in, get the score. We've put the links there. And yeah, if you need more help to figure out why you've been rejected, how to prepare, how to communicate, how to tell that story that makes sense to a visa officer, reach out to Ben and his other colleagues at Argo Visa. Because they're going to really help you guys out and get that success. We've seen so many amazing success stories because visa interview season, he said, is upon us. It is happening right now over these next few months. And we want to make sure it's one and done, one visa interview and the approval. Ben, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. I learned a lot. Yeah, thanks for hanging out and serving our China coaching community.
Thanks, Rob. It's always a pleasure to talk to your audience. They've always got great questions.
Yeah, and I know we couldn't get to all the questions, but we're going to definitely keep doing this again to help you guys out. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for hanging out. And put some more in the comments after this video, and we'll see if we can get to them there. Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Let us know how those visa interviews go. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.